Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, of course, depending upon where you are in the world. Today, we have two mornings. We have a later morning with us and two afternoons. So we're all time zones are covered here. So welcome to the Empowerment Sessions Unfiltered, session number 2. Today, I have with me 4 more beautiful souls: Nicolette Wijers, Havilah Malone, Karine Bedard, and Sarah Willoughby. Welcome, ladies. I am so honored and happy to have you here. Thank you for getting on board and agreeing to be part of the Empowerment Sessions Unfiltered. I appreciate you all. How are you all doing today?
Fantastic.
Really good.
Fantastic. Today, we are going to be talking about cultivating authenticity through self-awareness, consciousness, and embodiment. If you're tuning in live, please comment below with #live. If you're catching this on the replay, please comment below with #replay. So with that being said, happy Friday, everyone, and let's jump right in. So I want to start with some introductions. I would like the ladies to take a minute or so to introduce themselves. So I am going to start with Nicolette immediately to my left. Nicolette, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Nicolette Wijers. Was born in the Netherlands, but live in beautiful, sunny Australia at the moment. I'm a speaker, I'm an author, and I'm an emotional alchemist. So I help mainly women, but also men, to break through their emotional barriers to really fulfill their life and fulfill their dreams and live their life authentically in the way they are meant to be.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Nicolette. And right below Nicolette, we have the beautiful Havilah Malone. Havilah, please share.
Certainly. I'm Havilah Malone. I am originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. I am currently living out in Los Angeles, California. My mission in life is to be a catalyst for positive change in over 2 billion people's lives. I am a award-winning executive producer, actress, and 3-time best-selling author, and just here to live this journey out to the fullest and leave here on E.
Love it. Karine, how about you?
Well, hello. Thank you for having me, Brad. This is great. My name is Karine Bedard, and I am the sex positive relationship designer. And I normalize out of the box thinking when it comes to relationships because what we know about marriage and relationships can destroy happily ever after. And we are taught to follow certain models and they aren't working and we are wondering why. And so, like, we design our homes, redesign our homes. There's no shame and guilt about that, but we don't think we're allowed to do that with our relationships. And I disagree. I think that we should be redesigning, renegotiating, redesigning, rethinking our relationships. So I always say that I am a Bible school graduate turned Playboy enthusiast. And if you want to hear more about that, you can listen to my podcast. I am a podcast host of Breaking Free Authentically, the sex positive relationship podcast. And I have articles in different places all over Authority Magazine and things like that. But my passion is really to help set people free to be authentic in who they are, and freedom comes in ways that we don't think of. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, hopefully. So
Beautiful. Sarah, welcome. How about you?
Thank you. What an inspiring group of women. I'm really excited for this conversation. My name is Sarah Willoughby. I'm originally from the UK. I live in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. I work here as a transformation coach, infertility coach, best-selling author, speaker, and Reiki practitioner. And similar to Nicolette, I really help people to connect deeply with themselves, to rediscover who they are, why they're here, to heal, to go on this journey to self-love and to transform their lives from the inside out. So very excited to dive into this conversation.
Thank you all for sharing about who you are and the beautiful light you put out into the world through the work you do. So with all that being said, let's jump right in. I'm going to kick it off with a question, and then we'll just dive right into the conversation. So I'm going to start with you, Sarah. Since you went last, we're going to circle back around the other way. So
Yes.
vulnerability is a cornerstone of authenticity. How has vulnerability, how can individuals, or how have you used vulnerability as a strength in your journey towards being more authentic, and how has it helped to deepen your connections and your relationships?
Great question. So vulnerability for me has been huge. I think I'll start with saying I didn't even understand what vulnerability was. I saw it as a weakness, something to be avoided at all costs. And the first time I really understood what vulnerability was when I did a deep dive into Dr. Brené Brown's work. And my very first article that I ever had published, I sort of became vulnerable. I thought, I'm going to start sharing my written words with the world. And the very first article I had published was about vulnerability. And I didn't expect it to be published. It was. And let me tell you, I then was very, very vulnerable when it kind of went out into the world. And I was like, oh, did I really mean for this to happen? So in terms of developing my relationships, I think it was firstly developing my relationship with myself, and then allowing myself through my written word to actually truly express myself and to care less about what other people thought, and to step into my own truth and my own authenticity of who I really was. And through that, support other people, share my stories, share my journey, so that other people could also start to share theirs and realize that they were actually not alone, that we're kind of all in this together in this crazy world that it is to be human.
Love it. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. Karine, you're up.
What a great question. I might
Thank
ask
you.
you to
Sure.
re-ask it again,
Yeah, sure.
but I think I remember it.
Do you want me to say it again?
Sure.
Yeah. So as we know, vulnerability is a cornerstone of authenticity. How have you embraced vulnerability along your journey towards being more authentic? And how has that helped? How has that embracing vulnerability helped your relationships and your growth?
It's such a great question. I think, first of all, coming to the realization that vulnerability is a superpower, like Sarah was saying, like it really is. I've always been kind of an emotional person, actually quite vulnerable growing up, but I always kind of had shame about that because most people didn't. And so I think that when you learn to love who you are and not shame the parts of yourself that tend to be judged by other people, you can show up vulnerably, and create safety for yourself, which then allows you to create safety for others because you're not attached to the outcome. It's just the vulnerability in itself actually shows you who your people are. And I talk a lot about that, finding your people. And if I could have learned anything or taught anything to my 19-year-old self, it would have been, you know, not everybody is your people. And so those who cannot accept my vulnerability as who I am, are not my people. And so now I'm in a place where I'm surrounded by my people because I choose to be vulnerable, and it doesn't matter if they accept me or not. Those who accept my vulnerability are my people, and that's changed my life.
Well, Havilah, you're up. Oh,
Art Conviction. And in that film, Sterling K. Brown's character told Jeffrey White, he said, he said, first of all, people want to love you, but you need to show them all of you. And he said, I'd rather be rejected for being all of who I am than be rejected for being a piece of what I think people want me to be. And
wow.
so that hit so deeply for me because for so long I did like we all to some extent we wear masks. We show up a certain way because we think that, hey, this is what will allow us to feel belonging. This is what will allow us to be accepted into the group. And I had many groups, like my family group, my religious group, my school group. And so trying to fit in and find belonging definitely did have me wearing pieces of myself or just displaying pieces of myself at certain times. And then two, coming from, an African American family in the deep South, it was all about, hey, there's certain things that you keep behind closed doors, and then there's a certain way that you go out into the world and present. And so for me, that journey to authenticity, or that journey to vulnerability, it was about shedding all of these layers, pulling off of this what I should be, what I'm supposed to be, and like, who really am I? And what do I really want? What feels good and whole in alignment for me? And sometimes that does show up differently in different situations and with different people, but at least it's a choice that's coming from within, as opposed to a choice that's coming from an external stimulus or an external source. And so it's been helpful in being able to really curate and magnetize the people who are supposed to be close to me and supposed to be in my circle of friendships and relationships, because I'm bringing in the people who really are called to me and I am called to them, and not this version of me that they think that I am. So it's been extremely helpful, and it's been years of pulling off these layers and getting to that level of authenticity, and the growth is still happening.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing. Nicolette, last but certainly not least.
Thank you. Thanks, Ray. Yeah, as I mentioned in my book, just behind me as well is the box I never fit and I will never fit. And that started at a young age as a little girl, playing in the backyard just freely without any hesitations or anything being put onto you, till like you become a bit of an older girl, and the pressures have been put on with family, with school results. You need to be a certain way. I was very fanatic in my speed skating, so needed to be the best. It was always better than others, but that was not what it was about. It was all about still living your life. And I didn't realize what I was saying when I started my career in the luxury hospitality business. I always say to my team, like, you see, what you see is what you get. And that was like, I can't fake it. It's not fake it till you make it. We had signs up as like, you be on stage, so put your mask on. And I'm like, I'm not an actress. I'm like, I can't fake it. If I'm not having a great day, okay, you can put a smile on, but only for a short period of time. And it was also when I met my now husband, is like 26 years. He always says, like, you are who you are. You appreciate the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he quite often said to me, you cry about anything. I'm like, is that not wonderful? That I can just cry about anything right in front of you, and it doesn't matter what I look like and what I wear and makeup on, no makeup, all these kind of things, to be truly yourself. And I think you come to a point, I came to a point that I don't care what other people think about me. I do care, but I don't care what other people think about me. But it's very, very hard in the society we live in, with the comparison of social media and everything. We need to wear this, we need to have a certain house, you have this and this and this and this. And it was to that big time that I thought I had everything that crushed me down. And my husband asked me, what do you really want? And I said, I just want to be happy. And how does that look like? And I was sitting there with no spark in my eye. And I knew I needed to be completely going on this journey to find myself again, because I was covered with masks of who I needed to be, how I needed to act, what I needed to have, and all these kind of things. But I didn't know who I was anymore
Yeah.
and who I was being. And as much as I talked a lot, I was never vulnerable enough to talk about my emotions till I started my whole inner work and my inner journey to really express those emotions, because it's a weakness.
Yeah.
And it came all the way to being the emotional alchemist now, and talk about emotions every single day, every single minute of the time, and cry in front of anybody, strangers. It doesn't matter. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, that speaks to that whole conditioning piece, that we're all conditioned and all bred into us. It's like you've got to be this way, and then of course you bring in the familial conditioning of, oh, we can't talk about that outside the house. That we got to keep up appearances. That doesn't look right when we're speaking about what's going on behind closed doors. You can't air that out in public. You can't behave a certain way. It's crazy, and it's hard to break those patterns of conditioning.
Mhm.
It's tough.
Yeah, it is really tough. And I think when everybody around us is also doing the same thing. It's like Havilah was saying, you know, we're all wearing this mask. We're all wearing a mask, trying to fit in with everybody else who's wearing a mask. At what point do we all take that personal responsibility for just really sitting in our own truth and showing the world who we really are, knowing that we are all unique? There's only one of us, and that's why we're here, because we have these unique skills, gifts, talents to bring to the world, to share with the world. We only have this one opportunity in this body, in this particular body. And I learned that the hard way. And that was my wake-up call when I'm literally lying in intensive care, struggling to breathe. The doctor's unable to do anything to stop my deterioration. And I was like, whoa, I've lived this life. I've got regret. If I die now, nobody actually really knew who I was. Nobody knew what my mission was, my vision, my legacy, the reason for being here. And that was the biggest blessing for me. But the reason that I share my story is because I don't want people to wait until they're in ICU about to take their last breath. You know, we can start this journey back to who we truly are now. And that's why I love the conversation that we're having today.
Yeah. Havilah, sorry, I couldn't, you were speaking, but I couldn't hear you.
Hear me now?
Nah, it's very low. I
Oh,
hear you it's very low.
There's a lag.
There's a lag. Okay.
So when you start speaking, it doesn't sound right away.
Got you. Okay. What about now? Can you hear me? It's a little bit louder. Okay, fantastic. Use our projection voice.
Yes. Use your inner voice. Get it out.
You know, and that's what I think it's so important that we do our own self-education, because the education that we receive through the schooling system, through a lot of, you know, religious systems, like, it's not about us being vulnerable. It's not about us stepping into our power or understanding self. It's about understanding external stimulus. And so everyone has to take personal responsibility. And that was one of the things that I had to do. Like, huge was, no, you need to go work on you. You need to go figure out who you are and what you want in this life, in this existence, and then go read the books of the people who have done the things that you want to go and do. Go work with the coaches who can help you to get out of your own limiting beliefs that make you think you have to be this certain way, because you don't. You can be free, but we have to reprogram ourselves to be able to get to that place.
Yes.
Well, can I add to that? Because I think that's exactly what I do. I have an 8-week program called Breaking Free from Conformity. And it's all about reprogramming the religious and societal programming that we have. And people are like, oh, I didn't grow up religious. And I say, you don't even realize how much of the religious programming is part of the societal programming that, you know, causes shame and guilt about so many things, especially about sexuality. But beyond that, this idea of, like, you know, I grew up very evangelical Christian, and the idea of, like, turning the other cheek. So, like, that's a form of vulnerability, but it's not empowered in vulnerability. It's like the vulnerability that we have been taught is one often of weakness, because we're not allowed to step into our power, because that's selfish, or that's prideful, or you're not being humble enough, and things like that. And so sometimes we forget that this vulnerability doesn't mean getting walked all over. It doesn't mean accepting everything from other people. It doesn't mean that we don't get to stand up and say no in a loving way. It just means that we get to say, hey, no, I don't have room for this right now, or no, I don't have capacity for this other thing that you want from me, because I need to take care of me. We're not taught that, because that's not being vulnerable, that's being mean. Right?
Yeah. Someone commented saying it's also a form of giving away our power.
Yeah.
Right. And that can also be allowing abuse.
Exactly. And you see that a lot in religious circles. You know, I was taught to be a very submissive wife, which I had no trouble with because I saw it as very honorable. But at the end of the day, like, I'm an empowered woman, like, I'm a strong woman, but like, I deferred to him for everything. And I felt like a 3-year-old, and I didn't even realize some of the things that were happening to me. And the lack of connection and the lack of like just being equals as people, like, I gave that up for this greater good that wasn't even healthy, right? But this is a model that we are taught.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think you quite often, for me, it was as well, you kind of stuck in a certain world. Like when you're a little girl, that's when you know what your parents say, that's what it is. But that's only for a certain amount of time in your life. And I remember when I wrote my first book, it was like talking about my parents and stuff. And I'm like, what am my parents going to think about that? But I didn't really care because it was not even an issue. And my dad was the first who wrote my whole book. It's like, and he loved it. He didn't understand it all. But then I actually asked better questions to him, and the story was actually quite different from his side. And I asked my mom the same questions and better questions. And I got another side of the story. So again, according to who? What is the truth? So we sometimes believe this is what we think it is. But I got to know 2 different sides of the stories, as well as mine. So for me, it's now as well, by making it open and aware to everybody, I'm not alone. But also, I might not have sat in the same chair as whoever I'm talking about, like about my parents or whatever it is, because they saw it from a totally different perspective. And I've learned to fly like an eagle above it and see it from a bigger picture. Hence, I've moved all around the world, met so many different people, different cultures, different beliefs, different everything. I live on the other side of the world, they call it now. But we've traveled all over, met so many beautiful, amazing humans all around the world. And they all think about things differently. Even the same one word can mean like 20 different things. Still, you ask the right question, what it means for them, then you actually know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So be vulnerable and ask that question rather than just assuming that is what it is for them. Is how to break those beliefs and those assumptions.
Alara Sage commented, said, vulnerability is a superpower. It's the willingness to be seen. And I think oftentimes people confuse victim energy with vulnerability.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, and the whole concept of wanting to be seen, needing to be seen, like that is such a powerful part of this experience, because it's like, how, if you're the best dressmaker in the world, how will people ever know that unless you allow yourself to be seen? You can't do your work in a closet hidden away and then never share that part of yourself if that's a gift that you're supposed to bring into the world. And so we, a lot of times, especially as women, are taught to play small, to dim ourselves, to fit into, this very graceful, small self. But it's not about that, like that. And maybe that's a part of the challenges that we have to overcome in whatever iteration of life you've come into, for whatever lessons that this soul has come into this experience for. But it's ultimately to be able to break free from that and be fully seen, be fully ourselves and open and vulnerable and real, because that is what connects with other people. That's what other people can feel, and it frees them as well.
Yeah, when we be our authentic selves and be who we are, that naturally attracts your people, your tribe. Your vibe attracts your tribe, as they say, and that's what we have to do. We have to put ourselves out there, but it's not fucking easy. It's hard. There's a lot of fear, shame, all sorts of emotions that play into doing that as well, right? It's hard. It's not an easy journey, but speaking to, you mentioned it, Havilah, Nicolette, you mentioned it, and it's about doing the inner work first to get you to that point. We all have to do it. We all have the work to do, and that work never stops. That work is continuous because we're continually evolving and growing.
Journey without a destination.
Like magic pill. You could like take this pill and okay, now I did the work. Like, I'm done.
I'm here.
And I'm like, wait, there's more work to be done. Like, there's more, like onion, layers to peel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how many layers
Yeah.
are on an onion?
Yeah.
I thought I
Yeah,
was
my
done
onion's
this work.
my
What
onion's
the
pretty
fuck?
big.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the more you take off, the more you find.
Oh,
And
I
you're
know.
like, yeah. It's
But
like being
can
on a crazy roller
we
coaster ride. And you're like, can I get off? No,
Yeah.
not yet.
Can we talk about the like difference though between vulnerability and victimhood? Because I think that's so key. And I think vulnerability, it's scary because facing our truth, facing our emotions can be very painful, but vulnerability takes responsibility. And that's what we don't want. Victimhood is blaming someone else for your situation. Vulnerability is owning your part in something. And even if someone else had a part to play, it's owning your reaction to it. It's owning how it affects you. It's owning how you show up in the world regardless. It's owning the pain that comes with what's happened to you without laying blame on others. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really big difference. And you cannot be vulnerable if you're not willing to take responsibility for yourself. And if you are stuck in thinking that vulnerability is victimhood, you actually repel the very people you want to attract.
Yeah, I always see it as being like a princess or stepping into the queendom. And being the princess is, the poor me story, the victimhood, and look at me, and all these things we all do. And I'll be putting up my hands, two hands, because that's what we so trained and so used to, and it's so much easier. But when you step into that certainty and your self-worth and your self-expression and step into that queendom, however you would like to call that, that changes completely. But it's finding that inner power, that inner peace, that axis mundi, as I call it as well. That is very, very hard to do because it's easy to be kept the best kept secret and not be visible and hiding away so nobody can see your tears instead of just go like, this is who I am and this is what it is.
Yeah, I'm here and look at me. I'm here. That's it,
Great.
right? And not
And I think
everyone's going to
another-
like you. You're not going to be everyone's cup. Sorry, Sarah. You're not going to be everyone's
Right.
cup of tea, and nor is everyone going to be yours. So it's okay. Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
No, that's okay. I think the just building on what Karine was saying, the next step of taking that personal responsibility and moving from being the victim to actually really owning our part in whatever life has created for us is forgiveness. And when we can truly forgive other people, not saying that their behavior is okay, but when we can truly step into that space of forgiveness, and then we can look at ourselves and we can forgive ourselves for our part in any relationship breakdown or whatever's happened in our lives, then I think that's where the emotional growth and maturity really begins.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of work that I do with my clients we forget to forgive ourselves. And I think that's a big part of the journey back to who we truly are.
Forgiveness, 100%. We've got a question. Someone's at Darcy Kesner Hawkins. My friend Darce is asking, I'm curious if you all see victimhood is an evolution to vulnerability. Is it part of the journey?
Absolutely.
That's a really good question. And I'll definitely say, so let's give a specific example. So you have a child who is then molested by a parental figure in their childhood. That child is a victim of a crime, hands down.
Yeah.
And yes, because of that experience and the emotional toll that that situation can have on that child could then start to feel victimized. They can feel shame, guilt, blame, hard on themselves, low self-esteem, all of those things that put us into that fear mode, that put us into that lower vibration. And as we continue to grow, it is our responsibility to seek out things that can help us through that situation. Now, sometimes you're in an environment that you don't see the possibility of getting out of that situation. You don't see where resources are or that anything can be different. And so you getting outside of that particular environment. So yes, it is a part of the journey for people to go from being a victim to then becoming vulnerable or stepping into the power of vulnerability. And that can take time. It could take change of circumstances. It could take change of environment, influences, education, and it could take a lot of different things. So it's not just like, oh, somebody who has a victim mentality. Yeah, a situation can breed that, but we can always make a different choice for ourselves. And that's the point, is that we do have choice, and then we can do something different. And now that takes the work, and the work
Yes.
is challenging.
Yes, for sure. Karine, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I love what you're saying. Victimhood is kind of where you start, right? Like it, and then you become aware. So it leads to awareness. But if you don't ever let it lead to awareness, you are you're simply just pushing off the responsibility to other people. But as soon as you're like, oh, this happened to me and this was a terrible situation or the whatever, but then the awareness comes that, but that wasn't me. That was them. That was something that they did to me, and I didn't deserve that, and start to be aware, and it affected me this way, and it affected me this way. And we could change the story about that as we become more aware of what being a victim did to us, and that now it has shaped part of us, but we don't have to stay there. The awareness can help us get out of that and then make conscious decisions and conscious life choices and conscious belief systems, and let go of the programming that we had, because everything that happened to us, we're all victims of something. And everything that's happened to us has caused us to have a certain belief about ourselves, because we sometimes didn't have the full story, like Nicolette was saying with her parents, like she was getting both sides of the story. And it's like, then you can make a much more informed decision about how that affected you or what that did to you. But then you're not stuck with in victimhood. Now you can go, oh wait, I'm not just going to blame them. I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to be aware, and it's going forward. And awareness leads to consciousness. Consciousness leads to true vulnerability.
Sarah, how about you? What are your thoughts on that?
I think as Karine was talking, what was coming to mind was what we sort of started talking about at the beginning. Nicolette and Karine were talking about the work they do with emotions. And once we really learn how to connect with ourselves, to feel our emotions, to start to understand them, then we can release them, let them move through us. Then at that point, we're moving away from repressing and victimhood into that personal growth, that sort of taking responsibility for how we're feeling, not knowing that the emotion is okay. It's what we do with that and how we express that, which is where we can really be empowered on our journey to healing. We're all here just walking each other home, trying to heal our hurts and trying to be the best version of ourselves along the way.
Yeah. Nicolette, how about you?
Yeah, definitely, Sarah, what you were saying. I think it is also really a lot of our emotions are disowned and distorted by others, but also by ourselves, because we just kind of have our blinkers on, and this is how we see the world, and there's no other way to see it. So we distort emotions, and we believe it is this way or that way, till we take those blinkers off and look like 360 around us and go like, this is not how it is. And my saying is quite often, according to who? Who said that? Compared to what? Who am I comparing myself to, all of you? Yes, I can, but it's not going to do me any good, because I'm not you, and I will never be. And I think it's just diving in and acknowledging the trigger. And the trigger means that there's still a core wound to be dealt with. And if you go to your core wound, as we know, and your root cause, what it is, if you start healing that and doing all the inner work, what we talked about, it's such a powerful process. And that is not just 5 minutes or 5 hours. It can be 5 years, it can be 50 years, it can be never for some people. And that's okay. I still believe, I always say you need to say I statements, and I do this because it's like because if I blame you, there's the 3 fingers pointing back at me.
Yes.
So if we don't take that responsibility and that first step, if you want to see change in the world, change starts with you. We all know that expression. So, and it truly is. Nobody can change me. Nobody can make me happy. Nobody can do anything for me. They can do it with me. They can assist me, guide me, hold space for me, do everything what we do for our clients as well. In the most safest possible way, we do that. But at the end of the day, I always say to my client, you don't do the work and you don't take 100% responsibility, there's nothing I can do. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And I think that it was such a big lesson for me, because I often want to include everybody and do it as a team, and it's all about teamwork. And it is, but at the end of the day, it's me who needs to own and not distort and get the truth. And what the truth is for me is different than it is for you. And that's okay. It's not being right or wrong. And that was a big lesson I had. Often I say, you want to be right or you want to be happy?
I'll take
I want to be
happy.
happy.
I'll take happy
Yeah.
too.
Absolutely. And we still want to be right, but it's
But we're only here for a finite time.
I know. And it's
Make the
like,
best of it.
is it right or wrong? We're all right as well, because in your mind and your ideas and your emotions, you are right. And that's totally fine. Who am I to disagree with what your beliefs are? It's just making sure that it is in alignment with your values and your truth, then that's okay. So I always say, there's nobody telling you what to do. And that's what I go against, as I spoke with you about the bread with like coach and everybody else. It's not telling me what to do, because that's not going to work. Because that's not in alignment with who I am. But asking the right questions and better questions, getting your own answers.
Yeah. No one's coming to save you. Nobody is coming to save you. You got to be your own savior, your own superhero. That's it. No one's going to change the channel for you. You have to do it yourself, period. Otherwise, you're going to sit there and wallow and be upset and pissed off. And what good is that? That doesn't serve you. Least of all, it doesn't serve you, but it also doesn't serve the people around you.
So you're of a disservice of humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a big thing to discuss about. I think it's that disservice of not being truly yourself and your authentic self in the good, the bad, and the ugly is a disservice of humanity. We kept the best secret, then we are a disservice. They're not going to experience us. And I'm guilty of that as well, of not putting everything out of myself.
We are all guilty of that. I mean, as Havilah said, right? You can be the best dressmaker in the world, but if you're in a closet making dresses, no one's going to know who the fuck you are. And you're depriving the world of that gift that you have. Because the gifts aren't even for you. They're for everybody else in the world. It's not about you. It's bigger than you. And Havilah, this sorry, Nicolette, this reminds me of a conversation you and I had about when you were talking about your career and your path in your career and doing the voiceover work and auditioning, and you kept yourself silent, and you had to, people were prompting you, come on, you got to try this. You were depriving the world of your gift.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we were casting a project for AMC, and I remember being there with the casting director, having all these actors come in and thinking to myself, like, I should be doing that. Like that, I should be doing that. And then the casting director finally did. She was like, Havilah, you know what? I think you should audition for this. And then me, like my internal, that fear, like it just, that resistance just cramped up, and it was like, no, 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 not me. No, like all these talented people, like let them, do this, even though my internal desire was to be on that side of the camera. And after like going through the entire day, having rounds of people come through, finally at the end of the day, she told me one more time, she's like, Havilah, I really think you should audition for this. And I literally had a battle within myself of, girl, this is your opportunity, like go for it. And that same, nope, you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not all the enoughness that we fight with ourselves with. And I finally had to just like woman up and be like, okay. Like, and I did. I got on that same line as everybody else did, delivered the audition lines. And after that was all over, it was like 2 weeks had gone by. Had like passed the project, heard nothing. And then finally I get a call from the casting director, and she's like, I'm thinking she's giving me a call to say, hey, we didn't find what we were looking for. We need to do another round of auditions. And she called and she was like, Havilah, like you've been cast in this project. And not only was I cast in the project, I was cast as the lead in the project. And so I was just like, wow, these BS stories that we tell ourselves and hold ourselves back from the good that the universe is trying to give to us, the alignment that is trying to be gifted to us. And it's like, we have to get out of our own way. And sometimes we need somebody else to see our gift first and push us as we are on our journey of doing our own work.
100%. Nicolette, you were going to say something. Sorry. When I started to mention Havilah's story there, you started to say something.
I forgot that was at the moment. But I love what Havilah is saying, because I think it's the next step on your journey, whatever that step is. You need, like we always say, the coach needs a coach, and there's always somebody who will hold that space with you and grabs you by the hand and says, you're safe. I got you. We've got this together. Let's move to the next step and the next step. And just gently, and not in a forceful way, but just in a beautiful, universal way. When the sign is there, the next step is there. And yeah, beautiful.
Love it.
Mm.
You don't need
I
to know
think
the
it's
how will be shown by the universe.
There you go. Sarah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it's amazing what lies on the other side of fear, when we can walk towards what we're scared of, just taking that first step. Like, Nicolette was just mentioning, we don't need to know the how, we just need to be prepared to meet the universe halfway and just take that first step. And then the next step, I always liken it to walking through fog. You can't ever see what's at the end of the fog, but if you just take one step, it starts to clear, and it starts to clear, and it starts to clear, and then eventually you're like, oh, I'm in a beautiful field. And it wasn't that hard. So that's a lot of the work that I do every day on myself, and work with other people on, is just, let's just take that next step,
Having the courage to do that.
Yeah, see where we end up, because once we do that, then life goes into flow. That's been my experience. We're not pushing our way through life. We just gliding, flowing, and it feels so different. In our hearts. And I appreciate those moments, because we still have those moments where you feel like you're pushing, and then you have to take a step back and recenter and ground yourself and say, okay, is this right for me? Where am I going? But when we sort of are really connected to ourselves, we can learn the difference, and what is for us and what isn't for us, and what we need to say no to, which Karine mentioned earlier in our conversation.
Well, that's a whole other ball of wax, that no, being able to say no. And Sarah, you and I talked about that, and
yes.
it's a very big 2-letter word, and it's hard to say no. And as you and I spoke about, Sarah, it's like, and I've had other conversations around it. It's like, we always feel the need after we say no to explain why, to give a reason. No, you don't have to.
Yes.
No is a complete sentence, period. That's it.
Yes.
No, period, right? Darce says, Havilah, I love your analogy of hiding our light in the closet. And she also said, I believe that we have to stew in our shit for as long as we need to, until we're ready to emerge.
Yeah,
And Brett, is what I always say as well, is no is next one. So when you say a powerfully no, the next door is opening and it's bigger and better than ever before. But till you say the no, the door won't open because the next one won't be there. If you say yes, because you don't have the no, the next one.
I
And
love
as
it.
far as her comment about like stewing in your shit as long as you need to, you're not on anybody's timeline. Like, this is your unique journey. Like, everybody is here to live this particular iteration and experience of life in their own way. And so no one can judge how long it took you to get from point A to point B to point F. Like, it doesn't matter as long as you are moving along in a way that feels right for you and you're listening to your own internal guidance system. Because we all have that voice that tells us, sit down, wait, or go left. Say no, don't do that. We all have that. And so you have to quiet out the external voices of like, do it now. You better go work. Like, that may not be your path. That may not be your journey. So honor you individually. And that's vulnerability. That's authenticity.
Yes, that is powerful.
Mm.
Beautifully said. But we too, we're our own worst enemies. We are our own. I think that that's the worst shit. Like the external noise and stuff we have to deal with. Yes, of course, that's there. That just layers upon what's in here. If you can learn to quiet this, turn the volume down on this, that shit's nothing. That's a walk in the park. It's this that's the problem. That's the hardest part. Karine, go ahead.
And can I go back to like the programming keeps us from saying no? So in my course this week, I was leading my program, and in the cohort, I said, as children, like if you look at obedient children, like that's revered, right? To have obedient children. But what are we doing is we are teaching them to ignore their no on a regular basis, to ignore their intuition, to ignore. And a lot of times, like the parenting that we had in our generation, I feel like was, more authoritative, right? Like, just do as I say. And kids weren't allowed to question. That was seen as disrespectful. But like, if you can't question something, why should you believe it? And here's a really good analogy that my my ex-Christian friend sent me. He was a former Christian as well, so he sends me all these memes. And he said, there was a Jehovah's Witnesses that came to his friend's door, and the dad went to the door and said, "I got this." And he said to the guy, he goes, "I will listen to what you have to say if you can tell me one thing that you don't like about your religion." And he said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that," and walked away.
Wow.
So if we're not allowed to question something, then why are we putting so much belief in it? And I think we need to be aware of that. And so a lot of us come from programming that says that we had to obey to be worthy. We had to follow the rules to be we had to conform to be worthy. And that's not an easy programming to get rid of.
Yeah.
And so it's not about willpower, about learning to listen to you. It's about being aware of where that came from and why. Like, why can't I say, oh, when you start to unpack that, you're like, that's not my fault. It's not my fault that I have trouble saying no. It's not my fault that I turn the other cheek and I think that that's honorable. It's not my fault. And so then you can take away that shame and guilt, and you can just start living and being authentic with your responses, because you're allowed to question, you're allowed to make sense of the world without having to follow that script exactly. So,
Well, that's how we learn, is asking questions. That's the only way you're going to learn, is asking questions. So I want to finish this up because we're coming close. I know Havilah has to take off right at 4 o'clock, 1 o'clock for her. So I want you guys to finish this off. I would love for you each to share one tip or takeaway that the audience can take away to start stepping into their own vulnerability and authenticity from each of you. So Karine, let's start with you.
I'm going to go back to awareness of your programming, because that will inform you of where your disempowering beliefs come from that are holding you back.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I'd say that's probably the strongest thing
Yeah.
at first, at the beginning of the journey.
Okay. Nicolette?
Show your emotions, even if you're sitting in the closet by yourself, cry by yourself, smash that pillow by yourself, whatever you need to do to get the emotions out of your body. However that looks for you, or if that's by yourself or with other people, start doing that. And if we have a big cry, we always say, oh, that feels good. I feel a lot lighter. It only takes a little cry to
Yeah.
shift.
I see a
Allow
theme or common thread here. Closets.
No, just that's
Havilah, you kicked that off. You
Sarah.
started that. Sarah, how about you?
Learn how to be still, however you do that. For me, it's through meditation and knowing that your breath is your power, and that's where your truth is.
Beautiful. Thank you. Havilah, last but certainly not least. Let's go, girl.
Most powerful tool you can use to start on that journey is to ask yourself the question, what do I want? What is it that you want? And a lot of times it's easier for people to say what I don't want, but for you to really get to that place. And so maybe you have to sit with yourself and meditate on that and let that question marinate in your mind so that you can start to pull forth beyond all the programming, all the things that people told you you should want, to figure out what you want. And then once you're able to come up with that, write it down on paper, because that is the first level of manifestation of taking something from a thought form and bringing it into this existence of reality. And your job is not the how, it's the what. So decide.
Beautiful. Wow. What an incredibly powerful, beautiful, inspirational conversation. Thank you all so much for being here and taking part in the second empowerment sessions Unfiltered. This was amazing. Thank you all for your insights, your knowledge, your wisdom, and just for showing up as authentically you guys. It was beautiful. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you to the audience who showed up and commented. Thank you all for your questions, your comments. We will be this will stay on my Facebook page, so you can catch that there. And I just want to say happy Friday to everyone. All of you have a beautiful weekend, and thank you. Until session 3, have a great time. See you guys. Thank you for everything. Appreciate it. Happy Friday, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.